You know that person who still uses the same phone they bought 6, maybe 7 years ago. The battery dies too fast. The storage is always full. The charging cable only works at one specific angle. The screen has that tiny crack in the corner they stopped noticing years ago. And every time someone sees it, they say the same thing. You still use that phone? What's interesting is a lot of these people could easily buy a new one, but they don't. And psychology says that decision usually has very little to do with money, because people who keep old phones have figured something out that most people around them never will. Let's start with what everyone else sees. Every September, Apple holds an event. Samsung holds one in February. The internet celebrates. Tech reviewers unbox. Millions of people update their idea of what an acceptable phone looks like. And last year's model becomes this year's liability. Not because it stopped working, not because it stopped taking photos, not because it stopped making calls, because a newer one exists. That shift from functional to embarrassing without anything actually changing is the first thing people who keep old phones see clearly. The phone didn't change, the marketing did, and most people never noticed the difference. Economist Thorstein Veblen documented this exact human pattern in 1899. Over a century before the first smartphone existed, he called it conspicuous consumption, the tendency to acquire and display goods not for function, but for social signal. The smartphone upgrade cycle is conspicuous consumption in its purest modern form, a feeling of inadequacy manufactured in a marketing meeting, planted carefully in the culture, harvested every September when the new model drops. People who keep old phones felt this instinctively. They looked at the new model and asked one question nobody around them was asking. What does this actually do that mine doesn't? And when the honest answer was not much, they put their phone back in their pocket and kept going. But here's what psychology reveals about that instinct. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi at the University of Chicago spent decades studying the relationship between humans and the objects they owned. His finding was specific and consistently overlooked. Humans form genuine psychological bonds with objects they use daily, not irrationally, not sentimentally, as documented extensions of identity and memory. Your old phone holds thousands of photos, conversations that mattered, the particular texture of a specific chapter of your life stored in one object. Replacing it isn't just upgrading hardware. It's severing a psychological connection most people don't consciously register until after it's gone. People who keep old phones feel this before they can articulate it. The object holds something that backing up data cannot transfer, not the photos themselves. The weight of having carried this specific thing through specific years, that weight is real. Choosing to preserve it over chasing novelty isn't stubbornness. It's psychological sophistication most people never develop. There's something else the research shows. Psychologists studying long-term relationship patterns found something consistent in people who keep objects for years rather than replacing them. They score significantly higher on what researchers call object constancy, the psychological preference for proven reliability over unproven novelty. And here's what makes this genuinely interesting. Object constancy doesn't stay in the drawer with your old phone. It runs through everything. The same person who keeps their phone for 7 years has had the same close friends for 20, has stayed loyal through difficult years, has maintained commitments when walking away would have been easier, has shown up consistently when consistency was inconvenient, not because they couldn't change, because their nervous system requires proof before trust, and gives that trust completely once it's earned. Your old phone isn't just a phone, it's evidence of how you operate in the world. If you've ever held your cracked old phone while someone showed you their brand new one, and felt something that wasn't quite envy and wasn't quite pride, just a quiet sense that you and they were measuring by completely different standards, you already know exactly what I'm talking about. Now let's talk about what nobody mentions when they tell you to upgrade. The average smartphone upgrade costs between $600 and $1,200. Most people in developed countries upgrade every 2 years. Over a decade, that's between $3,000 and $6,000. spent on phones that were working perfectly when replaced. The United Nations Environment Programme reported that electronic waste is now the fastest growing waste stream on the planet. Over 50 million metric tons generated annually, most of it from devices that still functioned. Replaced not because they failed, because they felt old. People who keep old phones didn't set out to be financially intelligent. They didn't plan to be environmentally responsible. They just followed their instinct that working didn't mean replaceable, that functional didn't mean inadequate, that a manufactured feeling of being behind wasn't the same as actually being behind. The intelligence was always in the instinct. They just didn't know the data confirmed it until now. Here's what history makes clear. Before consumer culture existed, before planned obsolescence became a deliberate business strategy, humans kept tools for life. A good knife sharpened for decades. A reliable coat repaired, not replaced. A trusted tool passed to the next generation, not discarded for a newer model. Not because they couldn't get new ones, because reliability earned trust. And trust earned over years wasn't abandoned because something newer appeared. The smartphone upgrade culture is approximately 15 years old. The psychology of keeping what works is 300,000 years old. People who keep old phones aren't behind the culture. They're connected to something far older, far more reliable, and far more human than any annual product cycle. So here is the complete answer to the question this video asked. What do people who keep old phones actually see that most upgraders never figure out? 4 things. They see the manufactured need. The feeling that your phone is inadequate was designed deliberately, not discovered genuinely. Recognizing the difference between a real need and a planted one is one of the most valuable cognitive skills available. Most people never develop it. They see the status trap. Upgrading signals something to other people. Keeping the old phone signals nothing, and needing nothing to signal is one of the quietest and most genuine forms of confidence in a culture built entirely on display. They see the real cost, not just financial, the cognitive cost of learning new interfaces, the environmental cost nobody mentions at the product launch, the psychological cost of severing an object connection that held genuine meaning. They see what tools are actually for. A phone is a tool. Tools are evaluated by function. When function remains completely intact, the appearance becomes genuinely irrelevant. Most people forgot this somewhere along the way. People who keep old phones never did. That's what they see. That's what most people around them spend $800 every 2 years failing to figure out. Every person who upgraded last year is upgrading again this year. Paying again, learning a new interface again, adapting again. You're still on the same phone, still know exactly where everything is, still have the photos from 6 years ago exactly where you left them, still haven't paid $1,000 for the privilege of having a slightly better camera. You use exactly the same way. You didn't fall behind the upgrade cycle, you stepped off it, and from where you're standing, you can see exactly where it leads. Back to the beginning. Every 2 years, more expensive each time, with a new model waiting at the end of it. You were never cheap. You were never technophobic. You were never behind. You were the person who looked at something that worked and had the clarity to ask the one question the entire industry depends on people not asking. Why would I replace this? And nobody around you had a good answer, because there wasn't one. There still isn't. Your old phone isn't a sign of what you couldn't afford. It's a sign of what you refuse to be convinced of. And that refusal, quiet, consistent, completely without drama, says more about who you are than any new model ever could. Before you go, I want to ask you something. What year is your current phone from? And what's the real reason you haven't upgraded? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.